This weekend, I participated in MCS Week 15, and I brought BLACKWINGS, and it stunned me with how well it did. I was expecting to go X2 and immediately drop, which is what I did last week, but this time I actually managed to go 6-2 in Swiss and make top 16, which was a lot better than expected, and sure in top 16 I did immediately lose, but that's because the opposing tier pilot clearly knew what they were doing and is playing very well. But as for the deck's tier matchup, which is probably the biggest question, it's amazing. The triple Assault Blackwing Dragon endboard is pretty much unbeatable for tier unless they have evenly matched, and if you have Red Dragon and Archfiend, they need 2 evenlies. In this video, you'll see exactly why you should consider this deck even in this tier 0 metagame. And this is a quick duel from the World Championship qualifiers, just to show the sort of basic ideal combo line of the deck so you get an idea of what it's supposed to do. Now this is a hand of Maxi, Ghost Reaper, Double Allure, and Called By. That might look a little strange, but depending on the draws off of Allure, this can potentially be a fantastic hand. So to start off, I of course fire off the Allure to draw 2. Now off the Allure, I draw Shamal and Twin Shadow. Now because I can't do anything yet, I do fire off another Allure, drawing 2 more, and banishes Shamal. That's because I drew Sudri and Black Whirlwind. Now Sudri and Black Whirlwind lets you do the full triple Assault Dragon setup. It can let you pretty much do whatever you want. And the way you do that is by activating Black Whirlwind and normal summoning Sudri. Both of these will search a card. Black Whirlwind will search a Blackwing with less attack, and Sudri searches a Blackwing that matches a Blackwing Dragon. And off these, I will search Vada and Shamal. Now, the combination of Sudri, Black Whirlwind, Vada, and Shamal lets you pretty much do anything, and you always want to make sure you have these 4 in some way. Even in hands of cards like Simoon, you always want to make sure these 4 are in rotation because they are your main combo players. Now go ahead and fire off Shamal to activate Black Feather Whirlwind from the deck, special summon Vada, and use its effect to use material from the deck to summon Black Winged Dragon. I use Feather Whirlwind to bring back Vada, and then sync or summon these 2 Sudri and Vada into Nothung. Now I use Nothung's mandatory effect to burn 800, and then use Shamal's effect in the grave to grab Sudri back. This is very important because I need another card to normal summon off of Nothung's effect. Now why am I going through this effort to get a second normal summon? Well, that's because I can use Sudri's effect again because it's not once per turn. It's just per normal summon, and the same applies to Black Whirlwind, giving me 2 more searches. Now here, I have 2 different options. I, in this case, search Chinook, and off Sudri, I grab another Feather Whirlwind. I also had the option to search the level 1 Blackwing Tuner, and I could use that and Blackwing Dragon to make the Red Dragon Archfiend Abyss, take an Omni Negate to play around evenly, but in this duel specifically, I didn't think of that line, and I went for Chinook because this lets me get a Hand Trap Negate. In this case, kind of plays around Dark Ruler better, which isn't great this format, but will be probably better next format. Nevertheless, I activate the Feather Whirlwind, go ahead and use Sudri to sack off the Blackwing Dragon for a level 2 tuner, and sync or summon these 2 into Bury Storm, which is basically Foolish Burial for the deck, that also copies levels. I then use Feather Whirlwind to reborn a Shamal to set me up for a letter Synchro Summon, and off of Bury Storm, I dump Zephyros. I use Zephyros to bounce with the Feather Whirlwind, because it's not a hard once per turn, it's a soft once per turn. Activate another Feather Whirlwind, and then Synchro Summon these 2 into a Blackwinged Assault Dragon. This is the first of the 3. Now, one important thing to keep in mind with Blackwinged Assault Dragon is it needs a tuner Synchro monster. So that means you can't summon it with, say, Shamal. Then, using the recycled Feather Whirlwind, I bring back Bury Storm, and Synchro Summon another Blackwinged Dragon. Then I use Zonda's effect to summon a level 6 Blackwing from the deck, and synchro these 2 into Blackwing Full Armor Master, the towers of the deck. Then I use Blackwinged Assault Dragon's alternate summoning condition to banish Blackwing Dragon and a tuner synchro from the grave to summon itself. Then I set Twin Shadow and Called By. So what does this endboard do? Well, aside from basically winning the game, specifically, Blackwing Full Armor Master is immune to all card effects. It even includes the board wipe effect of Assault Dragon, so it's very hard to get rid of in defense position, especially backed up by Chinook. And Chinook is basically Effect Veiler that also debuffs attack if you control a Dark Synchro monster. Now, Blackwinged Assault Dragon is the real meat and bones of this end board, because its main effect is that each time your opponent activates a monster effect, you place one black feather counter on it, and when that resolves, you inflict 700 damage to your opponent. This effect isn't once per turn and applies to every copy, which means with 3 Blackwinged Assault Dragon, every monster effect causes them to burn for 2100 damage. And that means your opponent can only activate 3 monster effects before burning to death. That has another effect that during your opponent's turn, you can tribute this card 4 more black feather counters on it and destroy all cards on the field. So that's a nice backup option if your opponent starts breaking through your Blackwinged Assault Dragons. And not only does that not actually affect your Full Armor Master, this is where Feather Whirlwind's second effect comes in, because you can remove black feather counters to protect cards, so you can protect a lot of your field even if you use a self-board wipe. Now, Twin Shadow allows you to quick effect Synchro Summon on your opponent's turn. In this case, the main target for that would be Silverwind, which lets me basically destroy 2 monsters in the field. I also have Maxi and Called By as the generics. So this is a pretty decent end board. And there's not really much my opponent can do about it. In this case, my opponent's playing this bizarre Metaphys Sword Soul deck, but honestly, it doesn't matter really what they're playing unless they're piloting, Sprite, or if they're using Tear, they have Evenly in hand. One minor misplay is I should have used Maxi when I activate D-Fissure, because you can't activate afterwards, but it doesn't really matter. Because you see in this case, I burn them for 2100 each monster effect they use, and to make sure they can't make, say, a Barone, which would be kind of annoying, I summon Silverwind and pop their 2 monsters on the field. Then I go ahead and trigger Shamal to recycle Sutri, and trigger Feather Whirlwind to bring back Nothung, bringing them for an extra 800, just to make sure they're lower on life points. They use Gold Sark, trigger Necroface, which is fine by me, free burn damage, and at this point, the duel's over. They've burnt themselves so much they can't do anything, they're not playing an explosive enough deck, and especially because in the same my phase, they activate monster effects and burn themselves. But as you can see, off of its main combo, you can burn pretty much any monster-focused deck almost effortlessly. Now here's a duel from the early rounds of the MCS, and in this case I am playing against Tearlaments, which have a pretty strong hand, and I have a hand of Ash Blossom, Sutri, Crossout, Twin Shadow, and Feather Whirlwind. Now I go ahead and just fire Feather Whirlwind, and I normal summon Sutri, trigger Search Effect, and in response they activate Havness. Now here I go ahead and use Ash Blossom. The reason why is because now that I know their tier, I am confident that I can beat them with my full end board as long as they don't go off of Havness and start milling cards. And while they do in fact have Maxi, I have Crossout, so I'm not really that worried. So I chain Crossout and call Maxi. Now you'll notice this isn't the ideal setup. I have no way to block Whirlwind. But that's fine because Feather Whirlwind and Sutri mostly does enough. I can make a usable board out of this. So using Sutri, I grab Vada, use Vada's effect, do its normal thing, dump Zonda, summon Blackwing Dragon, trigger Feather Whirlwind to bring back the Vada. I trigger Sutri, tribute Blackwing Dragon, summon a token. Then I synchro these 2 off for Breeze Storm. I don't go for Nothung because I have no way to recycle Sutri, so there's no reason to. Using Breeze Storm, I dump Depth Rose, bounce the Feather Whirlwind, activate it again, and then I go ahead and use Zonda in this case to summon Ace Moon from my deck and synchro summon these 2 into Blackwinged Assault Dragon, and I use Feather Whirlwind's effect to summon back the Sutri from grave. I bring back the Breeze Storm, and then I go ahead and synchro summon Blackwinged Assault Dragon. Then I go ahead and summon the 3rd Blackwinged Assault Dragon and pass with the additional Twin Shadow. Now this does lose to any given blowout card like Regeki, but at this point I just need something to win it, and usually Tier doesn't play a lot of that. It'll only typically play evenly matched, but I'm fine with that. And in this case I have a sort of blowout in terms of triple attack, but triple attack isn't very good against this board. So they go ahead and fire off Scream, and then they go ahead and use Heartbeat, so I chain Twin Shadow. In this case, instead of summoning Silverwind, I summon Flora Master, just to give myself an Invincible Towers in case they do break through my board. Then I can go ahead and trigger Feather Whirlwind afterwards to bring back a Blackwing. In this case, I just bring back Breeze Storm as a blocker. It's a tuner. For follow-up plays, it's nice. They use Scream, they trigger Sheeran, but because it's clear they don't have an out for all of my Blackwing Assault Dragons, I can just start burning them over and over and over again. And they do play smart. They try and make plays that don't use too many monster effects. They search for Suliek. But it's just not a good situation. I use Feather Whirlwind to Battle Protect. There's no reason to, but at this point, it's over. You know, I know all of their cards at this point, pretty much. I know that 2 cards in the hand don't do much, so it's pretty much over. I try to steal Former Master. They chain Suliek, so they do in fact actually negate one of my Soul Dragons, but it doesn't really matter. They go ahead and try to trigger Kiklos, but I did have an Ash Blossom I ripped off the top, so I could stop that. And even if I couldn't stop it, I would have burnt them so much with the Assault Dragons, it doesn't really matter, because, I mean, they'd be at such little life points, I had a very easy way to lethal. But I do stop the Kiklos, but you'll notice that cards like Ash, if they negate an effect, you still get to burn them for Blackwing Assault Dragon's effect, which is just really, you know, painful. And they surrender because I have lethal on board. So the deck can win going first. So what? Every combo deck can. Well, don't worry. This deck has plenty of game going second, even if it doesn't open any staple cards. In this case, I'm going second with a hand of Zephyros, Shamal, Sutri, Simoon, and Twin Shadow. A solid hand, but I'd rather not have the Zephyros there. Now my opponent is on a crazy Sprite Punk Synchro deck. It's very cool, and makes a pretty nasty end board, which does help prove that Blackwing can actually go second properly. So now it passes over to me, and I draw Black Whirlwind for turn, which is great, and they immediately fire with Maxi. So that's what I have to deal with. They have Maxi, and I also have to deal with the Burundi Fleur, which is non-negate, the Spell Trap negate of Carrot. They can bring back another red off of Elf to get a monster negate, and they have an unknown back row. Not to mention Psychic and Punisher, which this deck can't beat unless I get my life points lower than my opponent, which will be difficult. So basically, right off the bat, I've identified one single win condition, and that's I have to somehow make lethal through Psychic and Punisher. And there's a couple ways I can do that. I could burn them, you know, hit them really hard, but it's gonna be very hard when a lot of my cards in hand are getting negated. So right off the bat, I go ahead and fire off Black Whirlwind to Fiend for negate, and they smartly use Barone. Then they also chain Elf to bring back the red, which is annoying, but this now means that I know pretty much everything on the board except for the unknown set back row. So afterwards, I go ahead and fire Shamal, seeing if I can maybe bait the red, but I don't. Then I use Simoon, banishing Zephyros, and this of course eats the Monster Negate. This is the strongest card in the deck, basically. So I lose that, but I do still have Sutri. But there is one more problem, that's that Spell Trap negate. So I actually go ahead and normal summon Sutri, search Vada, and Special Summon Vada, but before using its Synchro Summon effect, I use Twin Shadow. Now, I don't really have anything useful to summon off this, but it's a very scary card. I'm about to Synchro Summon level 10 Synchro, so I'm trying to bait the Spell Trap negate because otherwise Carrot would stop Black Feather Whirlwind, and I'd probably be dead if not. Now, it is annoying to have to recycle my Shamal, so I can't go for no Thung plays, but at this point, it's desperate times. Thankfully, I do negate it with Carrot, because, well, it's a scary card, and without knowledge of what I'm trying to do, it's reasonable to. So afterwards, I'm pretty much free to play. And sure, they're drawing a bunch off Maxi, but at this point, I have to win this turn. Now I summon Blackwing Dragon, and Blackwing Dragon is going to be very important here, because while for the most part in this deck it's a level 8 vanilla, its actual effect comes up useful here, because each time I would take damage from a card effect, it gains a Black Feather counter, lose 700 attack for each, and it can remove all of them to target a face-up monster your opponent controls. They lose 700 attack for each counter removed, and you burn them for the attack lost. And my opponent has a face-up attack position Barone the Fleur. I realize that this is my only way to lethal. I need to burn them enough and get Barone low enough that I can just one-shot them. So I go and use Zephyros, and I just try and trigger Blackwing Dragon as much as possible, take as much burn damage as possible. So one counter, then Zephyros represents another counter. I go ahead and use Black Feather Whirlwind, trigger Zonda, to summon from deck, getting never counter. Then I Synchro Summon into Draco Berserk of the Tenyu, because this is such a big attack monster. Then I go ahead and summon Vada back. I trigger Blackwing Dragon, burn them for 2100, and I summon nothing here, not for its extra normal summon, but for the attack debuff and the 800 burn damage. The reason why that's notable is because now Barone is at 100 attack, and my opponent is at 2700 life points. This means that Blackwing Dragon can actually represent lethal, and so does Draco Berserker. And the reason why I made both of these is because at this point I'm assuming this is a set Sprite Smashers, which is pretty much the only thing left that could actually hurt me. And so I go ahead, go to battle phase, then trigger Psychic Punisher, and I one-shot them. So you see, the maxi didn't even matter here, because I had lethal on board, and cards like Imperm don't work when you have monsters on the field. Now here's a quick run through of the deck list. Now it might look a little bit messy, but a lot of these weird one-ofs like Effect Veiler or Ghost Reaper are actually small world targets. I didn't get to show off small world here, but this is an amazing consistency tool that I think you must play in this deck. When I tried to play a false small world, it would just brick over and over again. And small world can even let you search funny things like Maxi if you want. So that's what a lot of these strange cards are. I would not be playing Ghost Reaper otherwise. As for the Blackwing cards, that's pretty standard ratios. 1 Orochi, 1 Shanga. Didn't get to show this card off either, but this is an amazing card. Turns any of your Blackwing Synchros into Trident, and it's also an extender that's great going second. It's level 2 tuner. Amazing card. I only play 1 because it's once per duel. Triple Vada because this is a fantastic card. It's a free summon that turns itself into Blackwing Dragon. I'm playing 1 Chinook because, as before stated, it's Effect Veiler that's also almost Kalut, as long as you control a Dark Synchro. It's also good going second because you don't need to control a Dark Synchro to use it. That's just for it to be a quick effect. So if you go second and your opponent's a Barone, you can just fire this off before committing to anything. Playing Triple Ash just saw Maxi. Zephyros is an amazing extender. Guardian Blackwings lets you bounce Black Feather Whirlwind to repeatedly use its effect. Shamal is amazing, lets you activate Feather Whirlwind, which is such a strong extender. It also lets you recycle Blackwings from the grave, which is good for Sudri and No-Thung plays, also good for making comebacks on the falling turns. Sudri is such an amazing normal summon, it's hard to describe, because it searches all of the new Blackwing cards, aka most of the good ones, and also lets you turn any monster into a level 2 tuner, which is very good. And sure, it locks you into Synchros, but this variant is only playing Synchros. Playing Triple Simoon, because this is maybe the most impactful single card if you can successfully resolve it, because it gives you an extra normal summon, activates Black Whirlwind directly from deck, lets you search basically anything. Amazing card. Zonda is great to have in the graveyard because it lets you summon a level 5 or higher Blackwing from deck, and if you can for some reason summon it, say off of, Black Feather Whirlwind, it can even bounce a monster on the field, which is really funny. Radiant is another small world bridge, and it's a great one. Lets you remove annoying towers. I mentioned this set can't get rid of Psychic and Punisher. This is a way to do it. I just had no reasonable way to get to it in that case. Allure is very nice. I don't like the card a ton because it doesn't give you advantage, and depending on the hand, you might have to banish a card you really need. But this deck needs all the consistency it can get, and when Prosperity is limited to 1, you kind of have to make do. Prosperity is great. I always went Banish 3 because this deck has so many solid starter cards that I was fine with it, and you usually have about 3 cards that you're completely fine with banishing. Let's say Kit Kalos, Obsidian Hawkjoe, and Barone. Banishing 6 really hurts your flexibility in comeback plays. It makes you basically a glass cannon, so I wouldn't do it. Triple Black Whirlwind because it's one of the best spell cards ever printed. It's amazing. You can trigger it 3 times in a turn. 1 called by, because I want to stop hand traps, but this is mostly just filler. You can replace this with anything, maybe more smaller bridges. I just didn't like Maxi. And Twin Shadow's a great trap card. I was tempted to play 2. I would almost replace the called by with a second Twin Shadow, because being able to Synchro Summon like that is amazing. It's one of the few ways this deck has her follow-up. You'll have seen that I did go for full Armor Master a lot. That's mostly because if your board is broken, you might just be screwed. You might just lose because this deck just needs so many cards in hand to get started. But Twin Shadow definitely helps with that. As for the extra deck, Kit Kalos is a Ghost Reaper target. The only real one I was playing, I guess Barone counts. No-Thung is great. Extra normal summon, burns, debuffs. Marine Storm is amazing. It lets you Foolish Burial. It's also randomly Goyo Guardian. I've never used this effect, but it's funny, and I imagine it'd be really funny if you resolve it. Hawk Joe is nice, it lets you revive level 5 or higher winged beasts. It also has an interesting targeting protection effect. You can do funny things with it. You can reborn Full Armor Master, which is half the reason I've been playing it. It's also a level 7 Synchro, so you can use like a Simoon and a Roshi if those are all you have. Silverwind is great. It's basically, you can summon it with its original condition, but it's almost impossible to. And you never really want to, it skips your battle phase. But the relevant part is it pops 2 of your opponent's monsters with defense lower than its attack, and also gives your monsters battle protection. It's your main target of Twin Shadow, aside from Full Armor Master. Double Blackwing Dragon, because you need it for Vada. You saw its actual effect can come up. It's mostly just fodder. Draco Berserker is a great generic level 8 Dark Synchro. It can attack multiple times. It banishes a monster. It's a very strong card. Hot Red Dragon Archfiend, I didn't get to show it, but this is a fantastic card you always want it on your end board, because it's an Omni Negate. Something this deck desperately wants. It doesn't really have any other Omni Negation. Full Armor Master is a great towers that can steal monsters and also board wipe. You can summon Barone if you don't use Simoon or Vada in a turn, and it's a solid Omni Negate. It's kind of filler. You can replace this with whatever. Half the reason it's in here is as a Ghost Reaper target. And triple Blackwing the Soul Dragon because minus 700.